Good afternoon and welcome to the first concurrent session of the day, Keeping Online Students Engaged. Our presenter today is Dr. Jacqueline Jensen-Vallin from Lamar University. Dr. Jensen-Vallin has served as Director of the First Year Mathematics Experience at Lamar University since 2017. As part of this work, she is responsible for course design and coordination, as well as training instructors of those courses. She is also an associate professor of mathematics and editor of MAA Focus. If you have any questions for the presenter during the session, please feel free to enter those into the Q&A section at the bottom of the Zoom room screen, and we will address them at the end of the talk. On that note, I will hand it over to our presenter.
Thank you so much. I am going to share my screen so that you all can see what I can see, and cross fingers, there we go. So this is not something that I ever thought I would be thinking so deeply about or so conscious of, is what do we do when we have students who are all online? And of course, last spring, we all had to figure this out. So there we go. Going to give you a little bit of background about Lamar University and talk about the situation that we had before COVID, and then talk about the situation we're in now. And some things I've learned over the past year, my experiences, but also listening very carefully to our online instructors and to our face-to-face instructors who've been forced to transition to Synchronous online. Lamar University is in Beaumont, Texas. We're about an hour from the Louisiana border on I-10, if you have any idea where that is, going through Texas. We're a regional state school. We have about 14,000, 15,000 students. We are almost an HSI, a Hispanic serving institution. We're just under the cut for that. Our Latinx enrollment is increasing. We have about 25% of our students are African American. We have a large first gen population. And we've always had a pretty reasonable online course offerings. And now, of course, we have everything online. So a sample of what we were doing before was we had all of the first year courses online. We wanted all students who were taking any fully online degree program to have access to those. And we were running them in both 15 and 8-week sessions. We were running them in 5-week sessions over the summer. The computer science department wanted their degree fully online. So anything that supported that was fully online. So the calculus sequence in both 15 and 8-week formats, if you can believe an 8-week online calculus course. I know that many of you are doing things like that, but holy cow, those students. And then linear algebra, differential equations, and our calculus-based statistics, our junior level statistics course. And of course, now with COVID, everything is offered online. One of the things I have been thinking really deeply about over the past year is the distinction between students who have synchronous online and asynchronous online, and how we kind of want to adjust to those populations. So one of the things we all try to do, I'm actually not very good at this. I'm much better at a daily organizational announcement than a weekly organizational announcement. But this was advice I got when we first started this from our instructors who've been doing online instruction for a long time, was to every week post, here's everything that's going to be covered. Here are your learning objectives. Here's why you're doing this. In other words, what's due, when it's due, and anything else important that's coming up. Like, hey, this isn't exam week, but next week is. You might want to start thinking about that. In other words, just give the students a really clear to-do list. Again, I've been thinking kind of a whole bunch about the difference between synchronous online, where you actually see your students 3 hours a week at a certain time, and you're kind of interacting with them, and the asynchronous group. My engagement with students last summer, last fall, and then this spring has all been asynchronous. And so some of my comments based on my experience are very much from that point of view, is I don't have Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 8 where I can remind them of all these things kind of, again, face to face, but during the synchronous meetings. And I'm really kind of relying on all the communication going through our learning management system is Blackboard. So all of our communication goes through Blackboard and email. And so how do I kind of keep myself organized, but also keep them organized? I try to have standard due dates. So everything is due on Mondays and Thursdays, and which is a slight lie, but we'll come back. And then other announcements. And actually, this is where I spend most of my time. So I tend to post almost a daily announcement, again, kind of like first thing in the morning. So first thing might be 8, 9 o'clock, like, hey, don't forget this thing's due by midnight. And then you have this other thing due tomorrow. And then this other assignment goes live, and look forward to next week. When they're in the middle of an exam period, they had always 48 hours at least to get to an exam. And again, I'll kind of come back to that. Like reminders, hey, the exam's open now. Hey, the exam's still open. And on Blackboard, I know one of my instructors reminded me that you have this option to send to students right now. So you can actually post the announcement in Blackboard. So everybody's theoretically checking their Blackboard every day, but they'll also get an email about it. We all know that there's this changing landscape of communication, and that even email is getting slightly outdated for some of our students. And so I'm also looking at other ways to kind of keep them engaged and get information flowing to them. And we'll come back to that in a second too. We have a Center for Teaching and Learning Excellence at Lamar. And one of the things that was suggested by the director of that center was discussion boards, not just to have the students, like this counts towards their attendance grade, but not just to have the students post for attendance purposes, so we can continue to see that they're logging in and they have a reason to log in other than doing their homework or taking an exam, but also to have them engage with each other. And so, for instance, this spring, I was teaching business math. I think the Hawks materials are math with business applications. And I had 120 students, and they were all asynchronous, and they were not even all local, of course. And I really wanted to build community with them. I really wanted them to support each other, to answer each other's questions, to cheer each other on. So it's not all coming from me, because that's exhausting. And so there were weekly questions in an 8-week course. They happen twice a week, but weekly questions that have them not only reflect on what we're doing, but try to tie that to their major, and also have them connect with each other. The connect with each other actually works way better than I thought. I thought that when my colleague told me this, I thought she was a little like overly optimistic about the whole thing. I was like, they're going to comment, I know, or I agree, and that's it. But they really go out of their way to say more to each other. And I really love that. So here's the what I post at the very beginning. So the like, welcome to the class. I want to know a little bit about you, but I don't want to make you share more than you want to. Share what you feel comfortable sharing. Sometimes I ask this specifically about math or about math courses. Sometimes I ask this about just them. I take the opportunity, I do read all of these. I read them reasonably carefully. And I try to respond to them. And so somebody's like, oh, we just got a new puppy. I say like, hey, do you feel like sharing a picture of your puppy? And they'll start to comment on each other like, hey, I also have a husky, or I also have twins, or, oh, I understand how you feel now with your 8-year-old at home all the time. My kids are now 18, but I can't imagine having them home for remote schooling when they were 8 all the time. And that's what I mean by commenting in a substantive way on each other's posts, is I really want them to look for connections and look for ways to support each other. We have a lot of veterans returning to school. We have a lot of people who are working 40, 50, 60 hours. We have a lot of students who have other obligations. And I think when they're fully asynchronous, it's nice to have them realize they're not the only person in the class like that. And these seem to work really well. And sometimes I get great things. Sometimes these are really superficial, the responses to this one, but sometimes I get really great comments from students about this. And they're really sharing like, look, I'm working 60 hours a week. I'm doing my homework between midnight and 2, and it helps me understand them better too. And then I get into things that are a little more content driven. Like, okay, so now that we're doing math and I don't want to just know about you, like, what do you remember about this? What's new about it? What's hard? What tips can you give to each other about it? I did this after their first exam this spring, and it was beautiful. So this one person was reflecting on their exam and said, I didn't eat breakfast before I took the exam. I thought I would take it at like 10 a.m. and I'd be fresh and I'd be ready to go. But I didn't eat first, and it really affected my exam performance. And so I really need to eat next time. And then somebody commented back, like, I always take mine at night after I get off my shift, but you're right, I really should eat before I do that. It's really bad to be hungry or crashy in the middle of this exam. I'm not thinking clearly. Um, we are giving our exams open notes now. And that helps, except for I think students don't understand how organized their notes need to be in order to be helpful and functional. And so one of the other comments that we got after the first exam was, oh my gosh, I had a ton of notes, but I also had incorrect solutions in there. And it didn't even occur to me to throw those out or to make a fresh set or to pull out the important pieces and have them all in one place. And so they shared with each other note-taking tips, which I could, if I tell them to go watch a video about it or share with them my note-taking tips, it's nowhere near as effective as them telling each other. And they were thanking each other. They were referring back to that in later weeks. It was really, really beautiful. Here's another example of, I want you to apply it. In business math, the course that I've taught most recently, most but not all of the students are business majors, as you might expect. And so I kind of asked them, how are you going to use this? How is this relevant? We do average rate of change in there. I'm like, when do you use average rate of change on a daily basis? The other thing I've started doing, again, thanks to a colleague, I've learned so much from my colleagues, is in Blackboard, when you set up these discussion prompts, you can put in the due date. You can also have them have to post before they can read anybody else's prompt, anybody else's response. And I've started doing that because on things like, how does this relate to your major, or how do you see this in your everyday life? I really want to know how they see it. I don't want them reading somebody else's prompt and be like, oh, hey, Sue rides motorcycles. I ride motorcycles too. I'm going to steal or borrow or refer to Sue's response in my response. I really want them to kind of think about it. I did have a few students this semester, because I had them blocked and they couldn't look at other people's responses first, who were like, I'm never going to use this ever, period, submit. And I was like, okay. And so I would frequently comment to them privately, but I would also sometimes comment to them publicly, where I said, okay, I understand that it's not always clear where you're going to see this. Did you try to Google how this is related to your major, or how this appears in your everyday life? Did you try to read the book for examples? I one week had a student who was like, I didn't do the homework in this section, so I don't have any idea how this is going to apply to anything, so I can't do this discussion. I was like, well, that wasn't really the assignment. But 97% of them or more are really helpful, really thoughtful. The other thing I'm going to say about the discussion prompts is I disagree with some of my colleagues about this, is I don't grade for grammar or for their writing ability. I really want them to tell me what they're thinking, what they're feeling about the topic, and we can handle the other stuff later. If they're making those connections, then I'm super happy. And if they're supporting each other and really forming a community of scholars in my virtual classroom, I'm super, super happy. So in terms of how do I communicate with them, how do I keep them engaged, these discussion prompts help form the community. But then I want to be able to have like a conversation. And like I said, I think email now is not the way a lot of students choose to engage. I, forever ago now, probably 5-10 years ago now, had a Facebook group for my class, and we would post screenshots, or when we were face-to-face, like photos of what had happened on the Blackboard. And that was fine at the time, but I think Facebook is now too outdated for many of our students, and the people who aren't on it don't want to join to see it. So sorry, my screen went blank. Okay. And so I was thinking about Twitter. again, Twitter's kind of really public, and I don't know if I want all of the business of my class happening on that kind of social media platform. So somebody suggested a GroupMe, and I wanted to kind of protect the community. So I set it up in GroupMe. You just go to groupme.com. You tie it to a phone number or an email address. You can set up a community, and you can share a QR code or a link for students to be able to join. Our latest Blackboard, by the way, blocks pop-ups. So that was awesome. So I had them trying to click through to join this GroupMe, and nobody could get to the link. They had to figure out that they could copy and paste the link instead. I wanted to make it a reasonably safe space as much as I could. So I added a question that I needed to approve anybody who wanted to join, and they had to tell me what their homework system was. They had to say Hawks Learning. It's amazing how many of my students couldn't spell Hawks Learning correctly. That's fine, because I still knew that they had like gotten into the class. They had to be somehow attached to the class to have even remotely the right answer there. And the thing I'm very bad about is, so I was getting alerts for the GroupMe on my phone. And so I'd be eating dinner and my phone would chime, and I'd look and there's a GroupMe from a student. I feel like I have to respond. I stopped getting alerts for my email on my phone so I could avoid exactly this problem. So I've now recreated this problem in a different format. So I try really hard to like look at it and then put it down and let them try to help each other. There were times where this was very successful, where if I could ignore them for 10 minutes, somebody else would post a picture of the work they had done on a similar problem. Or one of the things that they had a lot of trouble with this semester was getting their calculator to work properly. In other words, how to input the information that they needed to get the answer that they needed out of it. And so people were starting to send screenshots of their calculator or their photos of what they were typing into their calculator so that they could help each other. And honestly, the longer I can stay out of that, the better. And my students, students are so smart about social. So GroupMe works like many other social media platforms. They can tag you in a post. And so they'd be like, Jacqueline Jensen, are you ever going to answer this question? And then I would weigh in and I would be like, oh, yeah. A couple of times I was able to say, like, I'm not near any paper right now. I can send a picture of this when I get home. And somebody else would inevitably post it before I could, which was great. But sometimes it would, it's social media, so it has the same kind of drawbacks that any other public conversation would have, which is one student is frustrated by something and it can snowball into lots of students being frustrated. So we had a big ice storm in Texas and it shut down most of the state for a week or more. Some of my students were without water for almost 2 weeks. And so the university decided that it was going to shut down for the week where most people were affected, and then we would reopen the following Monday morning. We weren't allowed to have any assignments due that week. We were shut down, but that was supposed to have been an exam week. So we moved the exam, we shifted as best we can, but they didn't add any time to the 8-week first half semester courses. So we lost a week, and we're still trying to kind of we just finished that session, but we were trying to kind of accommodate and be open to students. So at one point the GroupMe blew up with I don't believe that Lamar wants me to really do this. I don't believe that LLU actually expects me to hop into this. And you get to weigh in and kind of mediate some of that. We have radio silence during exams. I was sitting there one Saturday morning when an exam was open and a GroupMe popped up, and I was like furious. I'm like, what are you doing? And it turns out that Blackboard was down and students couldn't get at the exam. I was like, oh, never mind. You guys are fine. Okay, we've got this. So let's figure out what's going on with Blackboard. How can we, and then I could tell lots of students the same information all at once, and then also log into Blackboard and post an announcement to get the information to the rest of the students. I had Blackboard, but the student side was shut down. It was pretty awful. So I know I'm not supposed to be monitoring the Q&A, but I am a little bit. So how often do I check the GroupMe page? I was getting alerts on my phone, so I would check pretty much whenever I got an alert. The students who private messaged me were not apparently popping up on my phone, so I would try to check the GroupMe page a couple of times a day, where I actually logged in and looked at the web page once early in the morning and once before I logged off for most of the afternoon or evening or whenever. I'll check it right before bed because most of my students were doing homework at 10 p.m. And the Hawks tools, I feel a little bit like I'm just going to sit here and tout the product, but many of you are using it and you know. The Hawks tools are really great for communicating with students. You can search by criteria to see students who haven't logged in at all, and you can email them directly. My students really think that I'm going through one by one and emailing them one at a time and saying, hey, I see you haven't gotten to this week's homework, or hey, don't forget the exam's open, or, you know, it's our first quiz. I don't know if you realized it's due tonight. And I frequently get replies to the students that say, like, thank you so much for checking on us. Yeah, I just got to it, or I'm going to do it after work. And I think it really helps them. Like, I would nudge my students if I saw them in class, like, don't forget, I haven't seen you in a week, the exam's tomorrow. So I feel like this is very similar to that. You can also do things, and I don't do this near enough, like search for the students who have more than a 90 average and email them and tell them, great job, keep it up. I don't do that near enough. So I really, like I said a couple of times, I've been really thinking deeply about this synchronous versus asynchronous question. I was talking about this at a colloquium a few weeks ago, and I was asked if I think that I'm over engaging with the students by sending them email reminders, by nudging them when exams are due, by posting the schedule, but then also posting reminders, by responding to group me's. By the way, the group me for a while for me meant that I was accessible, not quite 24 hours a day, because I put my phone in like nighttime mode, and then I don't get alerts, but I was accessible a lot more than I probably felt like I would have been if I had had a standard class where I could have just been like, well, I'll see them tomorrow at 8 a.m. so I don't have to respond to this message at midnight. And I really feel like for my asynchronous students, I don't have another way of connecting with them. I don't have another way of being in touch or making them feel like I didn't just set up the course and push play and then not be involved. And that's not the way I teach my face-to-face or my synchronous classes. I don't just kind of like walk in and lecture and walk out. That's just not the way I interact with them. And so I didn't really want my asynchronous classes to feel that way. And one of the comments I got this spring was, you're one of the more engaged online instructors I've had. And I really want them to feel like I'm paying attention to what they're doing and when they're doing it. And even if a lot of the content is available to them ahead of time, like in Hawks, you can work ahead. The quizzes are open at set times, and so are the exams, but you can do homework ahead. And I had lots of students take advantage of that. And so I wanted to kind of use as many ways of getting in touch with as many students as I could and really getting them to feel like they were in a classroom. I really wish that I had them an hour a week, and I do have, you know, drop-in office hours, but nobody would ever come to them, which is always fun. But I feel like I wanted to make these extra efforts at keeping them involved and engaging them outside of, like, I don't know what class time would be for an asynchronous course, which I wouldn't have done or wouldn't have had to do if I were synchronous. Does that make sense? This list. So last spring, when we suddenly went online, I think this list is very relevant for us as instructors and faculty, and also very relevant for our students, because many of our students were like, they left their dorms, right? They left for spring break and then they never went back, or they went back to get their stuff and that was it. And so I had a student one day who logged into a synchronous meeting for a co-requisite course for statistics. And if she was in her room at home, she didn't have good Wi-Fi. And if she was in the dining room, people would start talking to her when she was on the call. And so one day she decided that there was good Wi-Fi signal on the front porch. So she went and sat outside. And while she was sitting outside, one of the other adults in the house left to go do whatever and locked her out, like literally locked her out of the house. And so she's on her call with me trying to figure out her math stuff. And when she's done, she said it took her 2 hours to get back in the house, because that's when people came back. Like, there's all kinds of distractions and other requirements. One of our first year students said that she spent all last spring, her senior year, helping her younger siblings get through remote school, right? And so there's just a lot. There's just a lot. And I think a lot of us have very similar experiences, right? Like my kids are still doing remote schooling. They're in the other room. They're on spring break this week, but even if they were in school, they'd still be in the other room. When my kids are on Zoom calls and my husband's are teaching remotely and I'm online also, like there's lag time, there's internet connection issues, there's certain, we use Teams on campus and I always have trouble with Teams. I think it takes way too much, I don't know what, and I always have lag time there. And so I try really hard to be conscious of the fact that they have all these things happening too, and probably a lot more than I do. So I have a couple of answers to these two questions, thanks to lots of good advice I've been given. I'm curious how this is working at other schools, but at Lamar last year, we actually were super lucky. We were able to hire 3 instructors that started this last fall, but we've lost a lot of faculty from retirements and other reasons. And so our workload is not as bad as it is in many places, but they, of course, want to keep our students engaged and allow them to come back in whatever method, in whatever way they can come back. And so they have asked us if, since we're not physical, right, we don't have physical space on campus. We have a couple of sections of college algebra that usually run at about 70 or 80 students. And we can't social distance that. There's literally no way, even if you hybrid them, so you have students coming 1/3 of the time, we don't have classrooms really where we can social distance and seat 25 at a time. Not very many of them on campus anyway. So everything that was first year math went synchronous online or asynchronous online in the fall and again this spring. Lamar is being reasonably conservative and is allowing us to plan for online synchronous or asynchronous online for fall, hoping that we can actually transition some of those courses to face-to-face depending on what the status is of COVID and vaccinations and other safety concerns on campus. So we've been asked to open our sections to extra students. So sections that were normally at 36 are now at 50. Sections that are normally at 75 or 90. My section of business math this spring had 120 in it, and they just, keep asking for seats. And we don't have enough instructors to open new sections, and so you end up with these large sections. Now, the ironic thing, again, as many of you know, is that new guidance suggests that online classes actually need to be smaller than, not larger than, traditional face-to-face classes. And so we're getting all these students in. And so it does become a challenge to create community. It becomes a challenge to, I'm doing this with the discussion boards, but that means that my maximum response on a discussion board was 103 or something like that, but they're posting and then commenting on 2 others. So 309 posts twice a week. Even if you're doing somewhat cursory grading, where you're reading their original response and skimming their responses to 2 others, and then typing comments to the student privately or publicly, depending on the situation, that's a lot of grading. It's just a lot of grading. And, as I've mentioned, for these asynchronous students who I know are working crazy hours, many of them have, children at home of various ages. I feel like I should respond to them, and this might be a me problem, but I feel like I should respond to them as quickly as I can because they're making an effort in the course and I want them to continue doing that. And so, my phone shuts down at 10 p.m. and anything after that I don't see until the next morning. I try to check my email right before I shut down for the night, again, right before 10, and respond to whatever I can. But I tried to grade twice a day, so they're getting feedback right away in terms of those discussion posts. I'm super grateful that Hawks has been handling all of our other grading for us, because I would never have made it otherwise. But how do you set boundaries on that time and that responsiveness to students? It was suggested to me a few weeks ago, and so I didn't implement this spring. I'm thinking about it for summer, that you actually put in your syllabus I respond to emails and remind between these hours. I check sporadically in these other hours, otherwise you'll get an answer from me when you can. And it's kind of the same thing with weekends. I know we all work weekends, but sometimes I just don't want to work on a Sunday or a Saturday. Sometimes I just need a minute. And so, but when we're in this constricted 8-week format, I feel like I really need to respond to them as soon as I can. So yeah, how do you take care of your own mental health and your own needs while still caring for your students and doing this kind of the way I would like to do it, I guess, is the question. I would love ideas and feedback. They had said I could have up to 40 minutes just to talk, but I see lots of good questions popping up in the Q&A, and I know I wasn't supposed to be looking at that, but I can't help it. So I think that will give us some other things to chat about. Julia, do you want to moderate the Q&A, or should I just be looking at that?
Yes, we can go ahead and open up the Q&A. Our first question is from Professor Oakes. I don't know how the Blackboard works, but I know that Canvas has a calendar and a to-do list, as well as notifications to email. Are you finding it still necessary to create weekly and daily announcements of what's due and when?
So I have not, I know Blackboard has similar features. Because most of the assignments, and I bet you can share some information from it, because I don't know how to do all these things. I'm still learning a lot of the functionality of Blackboard and of Hawks, actually, and how they work together. So I have my stuff set up so that they have a weekly schedule, and then they have 3 modules, and within the modules, there's deadlines there. I feel like they have the deadlines in lots of places. I also feel like when I don't post the announcements, I get a lot more like, oh, I missed the deadline things. If I've posted an announcement or two about the fact that the exam's about to close, I feel a lot more comfortable, and this is more about me than about them, I'm sure. I feel a lot more comfortable saying, well, no, I will not reopen the exam because it was on the syllabus, it was on the timeline set up in the course, and I posted 4 announcements that all said it was closing Saturday. So I feel like more justified in sticking to my guns about that than they didn't look at the one place it was posted. And again, if I saw them in a Monday, Wednesday, Friday class, for instance, I would remind them the Friday before that an exam was coming up, and I would remind them Monday that an exam's coming up, and I would remind them Wednesday that an exam's coming up, and then the exam would be Friday. And I feel like I'm not doing much more than that. It's just that I have to type it.
All right. Our next question is from Professor Stock. Have you changed your exams since they are now online in Open Notes / Open Book? Why or why not?
Yeah, we've struggled with this a lot too. We have weekly coordination meetings between myself and all of the people teaching each of the first year courses. So like this morning, I met with 4 different groups of instructors teaching 4 different first year courses. And we've made different decisions in different courses. So we're allowing Hawks for all courses that use Hawks. We're allowing all of the exams to be written in Hawks and to be graded by Hawks. The open notes for all of our, okay, so here are our classes that use Hawks: our Intro to Stat, Contemporary Math, Business Math, and College Algebra. For any 4 of those topics, any 4 of those classes, the students who are using the mathematics that we're teaching in that class would always have access to reference materials or software to work any problems that they needed to that were based on information from our class. So we feel like them having access to their notes, like our Intro to Stat course also is Excel based instead of hand calculation based. They would have access to Excel. They'd have access to the help menus in Excel. And so we want them focusing more on for instance, in intro stat, more on the interpretation of the statistical results than on the calculation of the statistics. And so having open notes doesn't necessarily help them a whole lot. And if you listen to my intro or to my business math students this spring, one of the things they did learn is which pieces of information are important enough to rewrite so that they have this shorter sheet of notes. And so I think that having it open notes, what it really does is increase study habits, which of course then increases grades. But I don't think that the grades are better because they have access to a notebook full of stuff. I think the grades are better because by the second exam, they realize what those notes need to look like, what that information needs to look like. So we have not changed formatting. In pre-calculus, which uses a different product. In pre-calculus, we also have them submit scans of the work they did that support the answers they entered into their homework system. And the reason for that is that our pre-calculus students are all STEM track, and some excessively large number of them are pre-engineering, and the engineering department was going to require them to justify all their work. And so we're starting to kind of train them for that as well. But we have not changed format. Actually, if anything, we've changed it in kind of this more conservative way where the answers are kind of all or nothing. But on the other hand, their exams look very similar to their homework, their certify section, their quizzes. And so when I get a student who's like, I didn't know how to enter my answer, I look back and it's because they didn't do the homework in that section, not because it wasn't clear or because they weren't prepared. It's because they didn't know that when they enter an x-intercept, they need to enter an ordered pair, which is exactly what the homework had them do.
Our next question is from Professor Greenfield. Have you considered using Remind? He uses Remind to text students when a Blackboard announcement is posted.
So I debated about this, talking about like social media and all these different ways we can do these things, right? I thought about this a lot. I know lots of people who use Remind. I know my kids' school uses Remind, some of their teachers. And I decided to go with GroupMe instead of Remind and not do both. I think they're for very different things, but I didn't want to have to manage that many things. If you've tried Remind, I'm really interested to hear from you about how that has helped or increased engagement rather than relying on email, because I do think they don't check their email as much as I want them to.
Our next question is from Professor Anderson. Have you found a way to efficiently manage the grading for discussion boards? That is often my biggest hurdle when time is already so thin this semester, so I am certainly open to suggestions.
Oh my gosh, I know, I fully feel you. I tried to, so my discussion posts are usually open for 3 days. If it was a 15-week class, they would be open for a week. And so I tried to grade a little every day. I don't know if that's helpful or hurtful, but I tried to grade a little bit each day. In Blackboard, when they resubmit, the way I have my discussion board set up, if they submit just their post, but they haven't commented on anybody else's, I see that first. And then it pops back into my list of things that need to be graded when they comment on other people's posts. And it happens every time they make a new post. And so I will see it. So if they've only done their post, I grade out of 10. I grade 6 out of 10 if they've given me a reasonable answer to the discussion prompt, but they haven't commented on anybody else's. I give an 8 out of 10 if they've commented on one other's in a meaningful way. And I give 10 out of 10 if they've written a reasonable post and done 2 other comments. So essentially I'm always typing 10, 6, or 8, occasionally 0. I don't read anything late, and I grade a little bit at a time. So that one week where I had 100 and whatever I said, 103 responses, I was reading them 20 or 25 at a time. One of the time management things I've learned for myself is that I can grade a few of them if I have 10 minutes. So if I am like eating my lunch and I have 10 minutes and I'm not feeling like I have to prep for my next class or do something else or write some emails, I can log in and grade 3 or 4 or 5 of them in those 10 minutes. So I try to break down the grading so I'm not reading the whole stack at once. One day I hadn't done that. I took Saturday off. And so I looked in and there were 78 to grade and it took me forever. So I like to break them down into smaller chunks as much as I can. and I just update grades as they resubmit or as they respond to my comments.
So we have 5 more minutes left for Q&A. The next question is from Professor Scarborough. What proctoring service do you use for exams?
We don't. Blackboard does not seem to, so, okay, I'm about to commit a major faux pas and I'm being recorded. I don't remember what proctoring software Lamar University uses right now. It was ProctorU for a little while, it was Proctorio for a little while. I don't know which one we're on. It doesn't play well with either of the homework systems that we use in mathematics. And part of the reason that we decided to go open notes was kind of to level the playing field about the fact that we don't use a proctoring software. Because if some people are going to have access to something, we're just going to tell everybody they can have access to the same things.
Our next question is from Professor Stock. Do you have a time limit on exams? Why or why not? Do you shuffle questions? Do you think students are cheating during online exams? I think some of my students are cheating, but I can't prove it.
So I like Hawks for a variety of reasons. One, in terms of their web tests, one is that they generate from, they algorithmically generate from a set of questions that are all similar but different enough that you would have to actually get the work from somebody else and fix that work in order to be able to do the problem correctly. I know some of my students are using Mathway because one of them wrote about it in a discussion post, which I then deleted. I gave him the grade and then deleted the post so nobody else could see how he was cheating. We do have a time limit. We set the time limit to whatever our longest class period would traditionally be for the exam, partly to keep students who would otherwise kind of spiral into the exam from spending forever on it. So we give them 90 minutes, we give them 2.5 hours for the final. They have to do it all in one sitting. We allow retakes on quizzes. They're allowed 2 attempts on quizzes. They get 30 minutes for a quiz. They're short. They're most of my students are finishing the quizzes in 7 minutes and they have 30. We think that between the algorithmically generated problems, the randomizing of the order, the fact that they have a finite amount of time, and that we're giving everybody access to notes, that we're somewhat leveling the playing field. I'm sure there's cheating and I can't prove it either.
Our next question, for GroupMe, do you set up one account for the entire class or have them in separate groups?
I set up one GroupMe for the entire class. That was not required. I had 42 students join the GroupMe out of the 120 that were in the class. So it's totally optional, but they were starting to talk it up in discussion posts. They were like, hey, if you're not in the GroupMe, you should get in the GroupMe. It's really helpful. And that was kind of a nice thing to hear too.
Our next question is from Professor Yarbrough. Do you post videos explaining the process of solving problems for your asynchronous classes?
I do. Again, I feel like a Hawks commercial right now. I apologize to those of you who are not affiliated with Hawks. They have really great, my students love the Learn Mode. They love the just-in-time help. They love the videos that are in there. But I will often get a student who's like, whoa, what about this problem? And I have an iPad, so I will open just a blank Notability page. I will solve the problem on the Notability page. I will screen record as I'm doing it and I'll post that. Usually, so you end up with kind of this library of things you've solved if you get to teach the course more than once. And so I will often respond to things that appear in the GroupMe or email that say hey, I'm really stuck on this problem. I say, well, did you look in the content for this section? There's a video doing a problem remarkably similar to the one you're asking me about. And so I don't have to, now that I've taught the course 3 times, I don't have to make as many of those at any one time as I did before, but I try to pick the hardest thing or the thing that most students are asking about. And those are the ones I record and I post.
We have time for one more question. Are your business math courses taught by math faculty or business faculty or both, and why?
So this business math course is part of the math core. It is the only class that is required or allowed by the field of study for business students. And so it is taught by math faculty. The business faculty have asked us to cover certain topics. so that we can prepare the students for their business classes, but they're taught by math faculty with advice about which topics to highlight from the business faculty.
All right, thank you so much. It looks like we are out of time. Thank you, Jacqueline, for all the valuable information that you shared with us today. I'm going to launch a quick 3-question poll. And this 3-question poll is just going to get your feedback on this current session. Once you have left your feedback, feel free to review our chats for the upcoming concurrent sessions as well, so that you can join our other presenters and attendees. So our poll should be launched now for you to review. The next concurrent sessions will begin at 1 p.m. Eastern. You can view the chat for session meeting room links or access the conference website for a complete list of concurrent sessions and their descriptions. While accessing the conference website, don't forget to swing by the exhibit hall to say hello to the Hawks team. View a quick 5-minute demonstration and be entered to win the hourly giveaway. Your choice of a smart pen, standing desk, or $100 Amazon gift card. We'll see you at our next session.